So there's an
nervous, but
installer, by
excited.
the way. Do I need to
Yes,
do an installer?
yes, I would recommend that.
I I'm so that's so rare for me now. So I'm just like, what?
Are
So
you living that container life?
sorry.
Are you living that container life? Just the Docker down, Docker up? Is that why you don't install frequently?
I was doing that, and then I bought an M1. So now I'm in a holding pattern
Uh,
around that. So it still freaks me out that every couple of weeks or a month or whatever I got to do stuff. Okay, so I ran the first thing, Elm init, and
yes.
then it's saying some stuff here, and I'm guessing I just say yes because knowing all that, would you like me to create an Elm file? Usually default for this kind of thing is normal, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so I'll just do it.
So if you're used to the sort of Node and npm environment, a lot of this will be very similar. So if you're used to a package.json, you're going to find a known package.json, and it works in a very very similar way. Uh, the key thing about Elm, I think, ultimately is Elm is a functional programming language that is intended, I think, to appeal to people who are not from functional programming background. So wherever it can, like, just do the thing that would be more familiar to people, it does that. Unless it's compromising, like some part
Cool,
of
man.
what else Elm is trying to do.
Do we want to do Twitter Spaces and just have our phones open and take questions if people ask?
Um, if you want to do it, you can. I 100% like cannot do the bandwidth of like
Okay.
this and that. But if
No
you want
worries.
to,
No
you
worries. No,
can
no, no.
totally go
Well,
for it.
it would be on your phone, right? Because you can't run Twitter Spaces on your computer yet. So that's cool. Cool, cool. Oh, cool. Anthony from the Redwoods project just said, like,
Yeah, yeah, I saw that. So that's pretty cool.
that's pretty nice. It's always good to get a little bit of. I like it when people support with a comment because a comment's just as valid, I think, as a like. But it's like,
It's it's
you took a
it's a
moment,
like
right?
plus. It's a like plus for sure.
Yeah.
And I like explicit encouragement is always nice, right? So like, yeah, okay, I think this person likes this thing, but someone says like, hey, that thing you're doing, kudos on that thing. I'm like, okay, thanks. I appreciate it. Yeah. So let's see what it told you.
Okay. I'm just
Yeah. So
posting
one
this.
of the things Elm is also big on is like what I like to call like words for people.
For
So
people? What?
words for people, and it's like
Okay.
we've done the Elm init, and it says like, hey, Elm projects always start for elm.json file. I can create them. It gives you a little intro like, hey, what's going to be in this file? And it just like it's as much as possible. I think everyone's like very much used to. I do like an npm thing. There's like some wall of text. I see like 17 warnings. I'm told to just ignore them. I don't really know what's going on. So whatever you can avoid that and like write in complete sentences, it's maybe that's a little bit better. Again, all in the idea of how do you make onboarding not painful for people.
I like that, man. I'm listening, by the way. I just didn't respond right away because I just wanted to see how the code is looking on a small format, just to
Ooh,
see
yeah.
like how readable was it. You know what I mean? And that's it.
Yes.
But I heard what you were saying. I like that. So you're basically saying it's approachable.
It tries to be. It tries to be. It's like, well, learning maybe like a whole new paradigm of programming is hard enough. So why also conflate, like why even add to that with like sort of like harsh or off-putting, documentation?
Oh man, I totally agree with that. I'll tell you one thing I like and hate about React is that there's so much documentation in it and there's so many warnings. But then the thing is so many warnings. I think React is almost a good example of how you can actually go too far, where there's like really annoying constant warnings and you're actually digging to try to find the thing that broke and you don't really care at the moment, like about the
Yeah.
warnings. And then so many juniors don't even know how
no,
to filter.
this is true. I mean, I appreciate all the docs, but man, and I'm still like learning and getting used to React. One of the things I've noticed with React is just that, like React does a lot. It's attempting to do a lot. It's very featured. And sometimes, especially when you're just coming in, you're like, what do I use? And it's like, oh, well, there's use effect and use reducer and use context and use, and you're just like, it's a little, you can get a little shell shocked with just like the amount of things that are there. And you start to wonder, like, do I need to go through all of this before I can begin? So I definitely understand what you're saying.
That's funny. That's so true. There we go.
Okay, so
let's do this.
Hit that Y, man. Hit that Y.
Why, man? Why? Watch, you'll say you need a capital Y. There we go. Okay, I created it. Let's take a look here.
Okay, so let's check out the folder structure. And so elm.json, very similar to your package.json. Tells you what Elm version, what your dependencies are, what your indirect dependencies are, which is very big, what your test dependencies are.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty straightforward source file. The standard stuff. A couple things to just talk about here, which I think are interesting. So one of the big things about Elm, which people love and hate, is all of these dependencies you see here have been like verified on this version of Elm. When Elm, as you can see, like it's 0.19, so it's still very much growing. Yeah. Whenever an Elm version bumps up, if you want to use a package with that version, that package, the person who wrote that package has to say like, oh, this has been approved for this version. And you can't like front load it. You can't say, oh, like this is good forever, because you don't know that. This sometimes causes a lot of, or some frustration of people because they want to use a package and it's like, oh, the person who maintained this hasn't upgraded it since 0.17 or 1.19. But that's kind of the point. If someone hasn't touched a package or library in years, maybe you shouldn't be using that package or library, or at least like it doesn't just auto assume that everything's okay. So you as the person, you get to make an informed decision. I take a fork of this or just like put it in manually. B, some people might ping the author like, hey, is this okay? You're good to go. Or C, you kind of have to do that. The package manager will not let you just import anything. Also with Elm, all these packages have no JavaScript in them. They can't like run any rogue JavaScript. So whenever you import a package from the Elm Package Manager, it is 100% an Elm package. It only does Elm things. No code running in the background, no sneaky fetches, none of that. So that's a nice.
So it's not like Snowpack where it just automatically makes it into a compatible package, whether it's going to gum up the system or not. All right, let me just check. Elm, there's got to be some cool Elm stuff here, right?
Yep, the official one.
I think it's the first one, right?
Yeah. Let me double check, but it should be the first one.
That's okay. I can click it and you'll see. Like that's cool. There we go. Elm language support, blah blah blah. What does it say?
Yeah.
Syntax highlighting, autocomplete, error, hover info,
all fun stuff.
Integration with Elm package. Okay, cool. That one. What about Emmet? Does it do Emmet? Does it? Because let's be honest, anything with the word Emmet in it is usually like awesome.
Oh, I only discovered Emmet in like 2020, and it just like changed my life.
So you discovered it in 2020?
Yeah, but to be fair, before that, I didn't. It was very rare that I needed to write that much HTML at a time, just because of what I was working on before. But then once I did need to do that, and I found Emmet, I'm like, oh, okay, this is so much better. I can't go back. It's very once you use it, like you're like spoiled for life. You're like, I can't go back.
Oh yeah, totally agree. Yeah, once this
so
one
I think
failing though, so that makes me nervous.
Yeah, so I would for now let's stick to Elm. Okay, I think
just so we don't have any random stuff.
Yeah, Emmet is not going to be super necessary because honestly, we're not going to be writing that much raw HTML. Okay. There is an Elm formatter called Elm Format. It's the sort of de facto Elm. It should be coming with the Elm. I think it just comes with the what do you call it? The Elm support package now.
This project is deprecated for modern Elm support and VS Code. Oh, that's great. Okay, let's do that again.
Oh, it may have been the second one. Yeah, this is the second one.
Crowd.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
So
the
it's cool.
2019 one, the one that says improving the Elm experience in 2019.
Okay, so we can uninstall this one and get that one.
Yeah, that's cool. Why did you just change like that? What did I just do? I've never even seen that before. Let's see. Elm. Okay, so we'll nuke this one because it's no longer supported. And then this one here. Let me double check.
There we
2.
go.
Yeah, this is the one. Funny, eh? How this one still got 95,000 and the other one's got 30 something. That's cool.
Yeah. I guess Elm's been around now since about 2012 in some version. I mean, it's had some like big changes, but it's been pretty good, pretty cool so far.
So this is saying here, follow this link to install the plugin, which I did. Make sure you have Node.js and therefore
you have that.
And then make sure you have Elm installed. We did that.
You
and
have
so
that
then
too.
It's saying to get this other stuff, I guess I have to do this.
Well, if we want Elm test and Elm format. So Elm format is like the main formatter. We don't need it for this for tonight, to be honest. It's not critical. You know, it's just if you want to format on save the way everyone else does it, we can do that. But like, it's not like you don't need it to actually write or run any Elm code, you know?
Okay,
and,
cool. Then.
We're not really going to be doing any tests today, so that's fine. Okay, so let's just take a look at this. So we've seen the elm.json. That looks fine.
What do I do with this one? The LE one, by the way.
LE is just a way for you can write Elm in the browser. So it's like a nice little scratch box. A lot of people use it, especially when you need to share code with other people. You can just make an LE, pop the link over. They persist. You know, it's like the same way people use gists, but like it actually works, and you can import packages, and you know, it's a nice little sandbox.
Cool. There was a thing here. Where'd it go? This thing. There we go. So this one says, do I need to do any of this? I don't need to, right? This is at the end or at some point when we run it to make it, right? And then this one's just showing like an interactive REPL. And that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Elm init, we have our elm.json. That's technically, you know, all we need at first.
Okay.
At this point, we can go on the source file and we can make a file. So let's just like jump in, right? Like let's go to source.
Okay.
Let's make a file called main.elm.
Let me just tweak that up. There we go. Okay. Ooh,
and if you want, I think the cool thing we can do is we can copy that code from LE, the sort of sample stuff it lets you start with.
Okay.
And let's just paste it in there. You know, let's just like start from there, because that's like a nice little snapshot of how Elm works in general.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief walkthrough through what the code we're looking at is doing. Then we can see if we can run it, and let's see if that all works out.
Cool. Okay, so what do I do?
Okay, so let's scroll to the top of this file and let's just like take a little walkthrough.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing it's complaining about is that this says that our module's name is main for capital M, but we made a file main for small m. That's small m.
That's bad?
I mean, it's just it won't compile because we're telling it, hey, the module is main, but like we don't have a capital M main, we have a small m main, so we can just change it. Change the name.
Yeah, it didn't work. I got to do the move thing because of the Mac thing. Let's see. Okay. And move main. No. There, it should stop complaining now.
Okay, let's give it a little bit, see if it clears it up.
Okay. Let me just, maybe I'll just nuke the file, make it super easy. Nuke it. And then it's cool. So it's kind of like I'll just do it manually. Oh, cool. Done. So it's kind of like React that way, like where it's typically like, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
do a lot of, okay.
I'm going to start from the top. So obviously module main matches your file name. Exposing main. So explicit imports and exports here. So this is basically a file called main exposing something called main. We have our import statements after, and again, they're doing explicit imports here. So import browser gives you access to that namespace, HTML. We're getting some things from the HTML module, and we're getting some things from the HTML.events module. The big thing about Elm version 0.19, you can't just expose everything in your module. Like you have to be, hey, what am I actually letting loose from this module? You have to tell it. You have to tell like, hey, what am I actually importing from the stuff I import from? So none of this, just like you can't like just have this flurry of namespaces around, which you see a lot of times in some other projects.
Like React, import React from React. So you're saying basically in a way, I know it's not literally the same, but in a way it's kind of like when we destructure and we're like, no, we don't need everything. We just need, use state, pull in use state. That's what I need. And
yes,
that's it.
Destructuring is a very good word for what we're going to see happening here a lot. So if you know React, then you're probably familiar with the pattern of MVU. We have a model, we have view, which is just a function that takes the model and spits out HTML. And we have this idea of an update. Updates accept messages, current model, spit out a new model. So if you're used to Redux was patterned on Elm in the sense that your state is immutable. You have one state that's the one source of truth for the application. You can use functions to break down the changes however you want, but ultimately got the one thing. So here we have our model. Our model is just one little record. It's got one field, count, that's an integer. Cool. You have to provide an initial state for your model. That's just how life works. So we have this initial model where we set the count at 0. Messages are, well, what signals can be passed across your application? Like what can the user do? And we have like 2 of them, increment and decrement. So this may or may not be your first time seeing this type of type. Elm is a functional language, so we have things like abstract data types. So we don't have to like wrap this in a record or define it as a string. The type message is either increment or decrement. Like that's just what it is. Those are the 2 things it can be.
Is that an or? So it's like this, basically?
Yes.
Except that this is just the Elm way of doing it.
Yeah. You'll see it in Elm, Haskell, F#, these types of languages. This is what we call a sum type. So it can be any of these things separated by the pipe.
Yeah, I think I know it as a union. Yeah.
Right.
Just because I'm just learning a smidgen of TypeScript.
TypeScript?
So, yeah. So
TypeScript has them as well, and it works in pretty much the same way. So we tend to think of like records are what we call product types, and unions are what we call sum types. Sum, as in it is this or this or this or this. Record types, it is this and this and this and this. For each field in your record, that's like it is all of them in some various way.
So is this a record type then? This one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
so
type theoretically alias, just go on and on and on, right?
Yeah, you could just keep adding fields if you needed to. Okay. So type alias, so what we're saying is like this is a record, we're giving it an alias of model, but it is, it's a record. So down we see our update function. So update is basically the only place you're allowed to change state and update. So what you see like the Elm way, which is from like the languages that it's based on, you define your types above the type definition. A lot of people really like this feature because it means when you're going into an application, you can just scan the types of things without having to go into the implementation of the functions, right? I'm just looking at like what type does this accept, what type does this return? And that's a quick way to get your bearings in a file. So update says, hey, if you give me a message and a model, I will return a new model. Is so how we read that. So the last thing is what it returns. The other things are the parameters.
It's like a
And
JavaScript compose function. You take in the message, then you take in the model, and then at the end, the final return is the updated model from the message. Yeah, makes sense.
And then in the function, we're seeing, a case statement, right? Or a switch statement, as some people know it as. The cool thing about Elm is that when you do case statements, you have to be exhaustive. So because message has an increment and a decrement, like Elm won't compile unless you tell it, like you have to address all the cases,
all the states.
Yeah. So let's say if you wanted to, you could add another like message type, right? Just, put another pipe and type in kind of anything you want. That's already mad at you.
Yeah. Where am I getting increment from? Okay, I'm not getting
increment. Isn't like that's what we've defined increment here. Like we've called it increment.
Can I do null?
You can now. So there's a couple things happening here. So I want you to go. So it's warning you like, hey, you've made this version of this null, but you're not using it anywhere. And that's just a warning. But if you look at the case statement, what it's telling you on that error, let's look at what that error is saying if we hover over the error. Or we could, define it.
Sorry, just having a little bit of fun. No, I'll stop.
Go for it. Go for it.
No.
Go for it.
Okay, cool. I was like, cool, I'll get the right code. The model, and then count, and that's it. Like, can I just do it like that?
Notice that the error went away. Well, so this syntax says you're going to change count to something, so you kind of need to change it to give it a value. If you want to just spit back out the model, you can just like spit back out the model, right? Like you just return model.
There we go. That's what I was going for. Oh, okay. Now it hates me for something else.
Right. Because you are now saying, hey, change the count field of model to the model itself, which is a little recursive, kind of kooky, but that's okay.
That's true. Yeah. There we go.
And no,
as soon as you said about, can we add another one? That's where I went right away. I was like, well, there could be a situation where you don't want to add anything.
Right. And we can look at a different way to do this as well. So, I mean, the key thing here, right, was that as soon as you added that third type for message, like that third implement, basically a third value for message, the case statement was like, hey, you gotta handle that, right? Like you can't. So that's something you get from you can't have mismatches. So let's say we came in later and we refactored this code and we have this message here, but let's say it was like buried in some other file and we're working with it and we added like a couple other types. All the way here in this code, it's going to start yelling, hey, you got to handle every case, right? Like, and it's not going to compile unless you don't. Now, the handling might be, hey, don't do anything, or I don't care, but you still have to tell it, like, that's what I want you to do. And that's something that's like really powerful. I mean, that's another thing you can get in TypeScript as well, but it's something that I've always missed in JavaScript. If I make a change to a type, all the places where I'm using that, do I know that like I need to address this? And we've known, like, we've both gone through in other code bases where you've made a tweak and you're like hunting down, okay, where did I use this? I used this here, and you're using like Control F or something to like find and make sure like it's all been addressed. Maybe just let the compiler do that for you, And okay, so I just indulge me for a second and delete that null you just made.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. I mean, it's not like I fixed anything. What? I just fixed a whole bunch of code and it took me like an hour.
And let's take a look at what the error actually says.
Oops. There we go. All right. I'll just hover
over it.
See if I hover higher, see if it changes anything. This case does not have branches for all possibilities. Missing possibilities include null. Does not have all branches for all possibilities missing. Okay, so it's the same. Yeah.
So it's telling us, I don't know. This is something that I've always liked about Elm. Again, this idea of let's make error messages for humans, not for machines. right? So it's not like, hey, error online. It's just like, hey, this, you are using a case statement, you are missing a value. I think it is this one, and the compiler doesn't get it right 100% of the time, but that's a lot easier for me to debug than error online. And he's just like, I don't know, Okay. So that's cool. Let's see if we can actually just like run this and see what it does. So we'll take out your little null there. We can put it back later.
Oh, take it back. Oh, okay. I was like, oh, you want to try run it and see what? I was like,
you can put it back. It's fine. It's totally okay. The nice thing about if it compiles, then like it's going to work. That's the key thing here. So once you got it to compile, you were good to go. So we've done Elm init.
There we go.
Now we're going to try Elm Reactor, which is just spinning up a little live server.
Oh, I got to do Elm Reactor. Okay, I skipped past that one. Hold on. There you go. Is this kind of like a pre-compile, like preview thing, or is this compile and run?
Compile and run.
Okay. Because I just saw the make and I wondered why.
Yeah. So make is great if you want to build, not necessarily spin up the little live server. So like a lot of people, Elm Reactor is sort of like the one to get you started. A lot of people have, different setups for doing their Elm work with like hot reloading and all the fancy stuff. So when we go here, we see, hey, these are your dependencies. This is your file navigation. This is your elm.json. So let's go to the source, I think, main.elm, and it gives you your little Elm map.
That's so cool.
Now, let's talk about like what's happening in the background. And we mentioned this a little bit. Elm compiles to JavaScript. Mm-hmm. Elm is a language. It's, Turing complete, but ultimately the goal is to do work in the browser. So when you hit compile, the compiler takes the Elm and it spits out some very condensed, very concise, very fast, very safe JavaScript. And that gets put typically in an index.html file, unless you tell it otherwise. And that's what we're working with right now.
Just look while you were talking about it, right? Because it's like, should be making HTML. What does that HTML look like? How does it correlate to what we're doing?
Yep.
Right. Let's see anything in the console.
So let's open that.
Nothing, right?
There you go.
And network. Yeah.
So we have that little elm.js file. Yeah. And we can take a look at it. And it's not very readable because it's not supposed to be readable because you're writing in Elm, you're not writing in JavaScript. So that is the big difference between this and TypeScript, right? Like TypeScript is ultimately like a layer over JS. When you compile TypeScript, it's basically just like removing the TypeScript elements and leaving behind the JavaScript elements. Elm is you write in Elm, and then I'm going to produce some sort of optimal JS. You're not meant to look at, write, or read that JS. It's just what's going to be running, So that is one of the big differences I would say between Elm and TypeScript. Elm is not a layer over JavaScript. It is a language that just happens to compile to JavaScript. And
I'm just impressed that there's a var.
Oh yeah,
that's literally what I was thinking. I was like, "There's a var in there. That's impressive."
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that I think this is very, very, very optimized JS. So I think it's also supposed to be like broadly compatible. So
no worries. It's just I haven't seen a var like in a while.
In so long. Hey, I'm a big const man, so
I'll
write a var at gunpoint, but like I write vars when I need vars, and I very rarely need vars. That's in my day-to-day. That's where I'm at,
There we go.
Okay, so let's work our way down a little bit more. We talked about the model. We talked about the update. We have one more piece of this triumvirate left to look at, and that is the view.
Oh,
and
the view.
The first thing we notice, again, you always check types first. So the type of the view is pretty straightforward. Hey, you give me a model, I output an HTML message. And note that that message does correspond to the message type we made above. So it's going to be HTML, and the HTML will have those messages in it. When we look at the actual thing, so the way Elm works, so this is from the HTML library. All the HTML elements that we know and love are represented here as functions. All those functions take two lists. The first list is attributes. The second list is sub-elements. So our div has a bunch of attributes. Well, it has an empty list. We didn't put any attributes on our div. There's no styling there. There's like nothing there. And then its list of sub-elements is a button element, another div where we put our text, and then another button. And each one of those. So every HTML element, if you're styling or writing your HTML like this, follows this pattern. Function name, list of attributes, list of sub-elements. And what we're seeing on the screen with those two buttons is that direct translation. So our button gets an on-click handler and the message that happens when we click. And then it gets the content that goes in the button, which is the text +1. So text here, I'm not sure if the IntelliSense will show you if you hover over it. That text is in itself a little function that takes a string, spits out some HTML messages, right? Because everything here, it just has to be nested HTML. So text is just this little function that takes some string, outputs some HTML. Button gets some list of attributes, some list of sub-elements, some list of HTML messages, and it's all composable. So they chose to break it down like this. You can move these into sub-functions if you wanted. Ultimately, everything we do here, there's no classes. It is just functions and data types. Functions accept data, they return data, right? So let's hover over the div for a second. Let's check out the type for div.
The first one?
Yeah. So, hey, give me a list of attribute messages. Give me a list of HTML messages. Give you back an HTML message.
Everything is composed.
Everything is composed, and that means everything is interchangeable as long as the types match up. You can always swap where necessary, right? So we could have made, well, we can poke around to this a little bit after. But yeah, it's your view is just a function, takes in a model, outputs some HTML.
This is why people say to junior developers, they should be using a language like this, right?
Yes.
This is part of the reason why, because I'm looking at this now and I'm thinking how rigid, like I could see myself bashing my head against the wall on something simple initially, right? Because it's like, you have to do it following this functional, like tightly functional pattern, not functional, like, yeah, it's functional, I made it into small functions, but like truly following the philosophy. And I can imagine that being quite transformational. I'm now thinking about, maybe I should put more effort into this.
The nice thing is, like you said, at the beginning, at the beginning, you're right. Like, it's like, these are the rules. And if you don't get the rules, you're kind of, I don't know what to do. And I think that is where the compiler, the documentation, the community, everybody tries to help you. Because once you kind of get in the flow and you realize, I only kind of need to remember like 4 or 5 things, my update changes the model. The view takes the model, returns HTML, like my messages tell you what you can do. And like, once you kind of get into that pattern, it's like, oh, extending this is, you still have to kind of do the work of figuring stuff out, but you start getting the intuition of, well, here I need a function that does this, or like here I need a data type that holds that, and you start working through it. Last thing, that little main function down at the bottom there. So this is
like Python.
This puts it all together. Yeah. So our main function returns this program thing, and all we kind of need to understand is we plug in our initial model, our view, and our update, and the Elm runtime deals with the rest. So a big thing here that is different from React. React lets you poke at a lot of things. You can poke at the DOM. You can like inject functions that happen when like certain things happen underneath. That's a lot harder to do in Elm, and that's typically not the way you work in Elm. The runtime handles, like syncing up the state underneath and make sure like things happen in the right frame rate, like it does under the hood. Your job is to write Elm code. Your job is to write data, and your job is to write functions. Let the Elm deal with manipulating like the browser to just, or what I like is that like by the time you really need that in Elm, it's like, okay, well, you're ready to do that type of thing. It doesn't just gonna give you that for free. Something I always remembered from the Python world, they always used to say that I appreciated, is that Python tries to make like simple things easy to do. And if something feels not easy to do, it's probably not a simple thing. Like it's probably something that requires a little more like intentionality and like effort on your part. And maybe it should be a little harder. I think Elm kind of runs in a similar space. Okay.
I can definitely see how like 60% of what I'm seeing here is just stock. You know what I mean? Like, so it's almost like you could just use a snippet and be like you do in React, where you just go RFP or RFC. I always get it confused. RFC, I think it is. And it just creates the React functional component. And like, 8 of the 15 lines you actually had to write just got popped out. And the rest is just like logic. Or in this case, I guess you said logic and data, right? So
it's just all functions and data. You never have to think about a class. You never have to think about, I guess functions, data, and I suppose modules is kind of the last thing. And how do you do modules? Well, you make another file, right? Like some languages have the idea of like submodules and these like mini namespaces. If you want another module, you make another file.
And then I can just import the module this way, right? So I just be like, so instead of this way, because this is like an Elm module, like a core module. So I'm guessing that's why it's pulled in this way, right?
But up there, we're defining this one. So we're saying this module is called main, and it's exposing that main function we saw at the bottom there.
Okay, so if I was theoretically to import this, which I know doesn't make sense, but if I were, I would say in the other area, I would say import main and then exposing main.
There you go.
Okay, cool. So that's all I have to do. I just literally create another file here, bob.elm with the big B, of course. And then over here, I would just say import
Bob.
Bob exposing whatever Bob exposes of himself. Okay.
Bob should not expose himself, but yes.
I was wondering if that was too smooth. If I slid that in there,
you did well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so let's poke around with this a little bit. There's a couple things I want to show you. So, what's a nice way? So we have this little like counter app, and it kind of does its thing. So what if I'm trying to think of a nice way to do this.
For anybody watching.
Okay, so let's try changing that bottom one from a decrement to a multiply.
Ooh, cool.
Right? That's a nice little extension. And I'm betting that like without telling you anything, you could totally just like dive right into that, right? Step 1, you got to change our message because we no longer, hey, it's going to complain. This is not real, right? Thank you. That's now a multiply. What are we multiplying by? We haven't decided yet. Let's do 2. We can do 2 or something.
Cool. That's what I was just conflicted about too, right at that moment. I was like,
Yes. Oh, we still have some errors. There you go. So everywhere you changed it, it's going to tell you like, hey, you gotta deal with this.
Right.
And I mean, that looks great, right?
Crap, I should have done it before I clicked it so that I know all the places it was. That's okay. Easier for other people to follow too, right? I think I got it all. There's no errors.
If there's no, so that's the thing. If there's still errors, you're good.
There it is.
Um,
Cool. Let's go one. Oh, wait, let's go. Yeah, nothing works.
that's working as it should.
There you go.
There you go.
Cool. First
Yeah.
Elm program.
First Elm program, first Elm edit, and first Elm refactor. So Elm fans, and there are a few of them, they're notorious for saying it's one of the few languages they're not scared to refactor in, because if you make a change, you can just traverse the errors and it will tell you what to do so that everything ends up okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you still got to do your due diligence. You can still do your tests, but it is nice when you know, like, hey, if this thing compiles, it won't crash. You still got to check your logic, but it's not going to crash. It means that all your T's are crossed, all your I's are dotted, and the whole thing will never enter an invalid state. And that's something that we do not like as developers. We do not like invalid states. So Elm's claim to fame is no runtime errors. I think that's not true. Someone managed to do one, but they had to like do some like fancy stuff with like intentionally trying to divide by infinity or some weirdness like that.
There's always a way, right? There's always a way.
There's always a way.
The question is it practical?
It
I think that's the guarantee. The guarantee is that if you do anything remotely reasonable or even remotely edge case, it will never crash. Now, if you try to break it, it's not hacker proof.
No, and it's not trying to be. Most things are not.
Those are two different issues, right?
Exactly. So what do I want to do now? Okay, so let's do a little refactoring. I mean, this is cool, but it would be nice if we could do a little bit more. So what do we want to do next? Do we want to do some styling? Do we want to do
I was thinking like
elements?
An input. I don't know.
Let's do an input.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's great. So the input function is, you can probably guess what it's called.
Right up here, right?
Yeah. And I think when it popped up the little error, you could have resolved it and told it and it would have just done it for you. But yes. So
really? Okay. I got to try that. I like that. I like that IntelliSense stuff.
Let's see if that works. I've sometimes, so it tells you auto import from HTML and cool. Does that work? But it put it in a funny place. But
it just duplicated. I hate when that happens, eh?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. That's so annoying when that happens.
It's not perfect.
Okay, cool. Yeah, nothing is, right?
Okay. So
right. And then
right. So we can make our two lists, right? And while we're here, there is another thing that I should show you. I will post it in the Slack.
Not gonna lie, this part's bizarre. The commas right here in front of the thing, because from a keyboard point of view, it's like gymnastics.
Yeah, I use them in SQL now. I've become a monster. I really like the forward commas. It also makes Git diffs really nice because you don't have the trailing comma on the Git with the 2 lines of change. It's really just you adding something else to your list. But yeah, at some point the folks who did Elm format went with that, and they were all just this keeps us from complaining about formatting. Everyone just uses the same formatter, so it's just you're used to it now. Okay, so I shared a link in the chat that is to package.elmlang.org, source of all the packages.
Elmlang.org. Okay, cool.
So you should see that come up. You probably want to make that screen a little bigger for now, that window. Right, so this is the Elm Package Manager. Pretty much everything you want lives here. On the side, it shows you the popular ones, the core package, HTML, JSON browser, and you can search for absolutely anything under the sun. And what I was thinking is, so we're trying to add this thing called input, but we might not know exactly how the input function works. So if we go to the Elm HTML library, and we can do a search, and we can just type in input.
Here?
Yeah. And it should bring up, there we go, the first one, our HTML input. So it shows you where is it under what module, and it takes you to it. And it just tells you, hey, what's going on here? Represents the type data field. So in the case of our input one, it's not that different from any of the others, but sometimes you have HTML with more complex behavior, so it might have a more complex function. So I always like to just go here, just take a look at what I'm looking at whenever it's a new function for me, and just see if I'm getting the implementation right. But in this case, we have our input, we have empty list of attributes. We don't want any attributes yet. And we take a list of HTML. We do not have any sub HTML elements.
Right, because we don't have anything to say around it or in it or anything, right?
Right.
So this,
You know,
so then,
and I mean, this gets into like accessibility and good, you know, like front end design. There are certain
right.
elements, even though you can put sub elements, it doesn't necessarily want to. Like typically, you don't really want to put anything embedded into an input. You just want to leave it as an input. Okay, so now we're going to see if I can remember how to do this. So we want, maybe what we want to do, I'm not sure, but maybe what we want to do is capture. Oh, you're already ahead of me. How dare you?
Let's see. I just while you're talking, I was just thinking.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Also, this is the first link is the official Elm documentation. There's a walkthrough that's actually very, very good and gives you a lovely overview of the language. If I didn't think you wanted to hear my lovely voice, I would have just told you, hey, just like walk through these docs, and it's a very nice introduction to the language.
That's not as fun though. This is way more fun.
This is way more fun. Thank
you. Besides, I haven't spent time with you in like forever. I think the last message that we had before recently was just like, how's it going? How you been? I was like,
which are always nice, right? It's always nice to get the out of the blue, hey, how you been?
Totally, right? But this is better. This is the best. This is okay. So okay. So I definitely have to do something with my model, right?
Right, because we want to now capture the string that's being put in there. So
go up here.
Actually, so this is going to be really fun. So that's your message. So we're going to head up a little bit.
There we go. Here, right?
Yeah.
So then I will go like this, like that, right?
Ooh, that looks good.
Right?
Yeah. And I hope you notice immediately your initial model says, hey, models have count and content. So you're wrong. So we just need to put our initial thing, and we can leave it as blank. That should work out just fine. Double quotes, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Elm thing. Cool. Yeah, there we go. Cool. On the it even has it down here. And then
you're ahead of the curve.
Cool.
Okay, so it would be nice if we had, well, ultimately, if we want to change any state, we need to pass a message. So we should make a message that represents that state change, right?
Okay. I don't know what to do here.
So let's add a pipe, right? So we're going to add another option. We still want to keep the ones we have. And we're going to do something you haven't seen before. So in the example, they call it change. We can call it, change is good. So we're going to type in the word change, capital letters. And then we're going to give that message a parameter, a type parameter. And we're going to say change. Nope, no parentheses, young man. Just a space will do. And change, and we're going to do string, right? Because that's what we want to capture. So the idea is we want a message to be sent with a string, and that string is going to inform what our model looks like. So you're still good. I mean, obviously now update's complaining, but it should complain because we added this new option. But let's take a pause here and kind of get our bearings.
Okay.
So the first sum type we saw, we just had sort of like these sort of idempotent, just like these basic types, increment, multiply. They did not have any data attached to them. But if we want, you can have types with data attached to them, and we can have as much as we want. So we could then change, string, int, some other custom data type, like there's no limit. So you're familiar with enums, right?
Why does that sound familiar? Phenoms. Spell, please.
ENUM.
Enum. Oh, enums.
Yeah, enum. There you go.
Yeah.
Right.
Enum. Sorry, I thought you
So-
said with an F, and I was like, an
No.
phenom. I'm like, it sounds like something else. And then you said enums, and I was like, oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, when they think of sum types, they think of enums. But the thing about an enum is that enums can't keep any data, right? They're just like these single little identifiers. You just make this sort of like a list of identifiers. This sum type, or sometimes we call it a custom type, the different options do not have to be the same shape. So here, increment's just increment and multiply is just multiply, but change is a type with a parameter, and that's perfectly fine, right? We could have some other thing that comes in that's a record, and that's perfectly fine. So you can really like make exactly the data type you need for your operations. You don't have to try and squeeze them all into the same structure, and that's super powerful. So for increment, we didn't need anything extra. It's just increment. For multiply, we didn't. But here for change, like, hey, I want a string with this. And it's like, that's okay, we can do that. Earlier on, we'd ask the question, like, what are we multiplying by? But later on, we can look at maybe we want to tell it not just multiply, but multiply by a number. And we can extend it that way. But we're not going to do that now. We're going to do that after. Right now, let's set up our change string.
Okay.
So now we have this new message. We have to handle that. So here in change, notice, so the first ones, we have to pattern match on the type. And this type is not change, it's change and the string. So you're going to give that some variable name, not the capital, but a small one, right? So now we're doing that decomposition again. There you go. Yeah, cool. So it's like the change is coming along with some string. Okay. If that makes sense.
It's right? A parameter, basically.
Yes, exactly. So because everything, I'm going to say this, and if it doesn't make sense, it's fine. But you can think of change, just the name change, as a function that takes a string and returns a type. Okay. So the type is change and the string. Change itself is just a function of the string. Right. So anyway, point is we can decompose and we can work with it now. And I think you probably, at this point, you kind of know like what we want to do to the model to get it to update with that string.
Well, this part I assume because it's pretty standard.
Yeah.
So I got to say the model that I want to use or something. I'm guessing that's what that is.
Yeah. So now we put in the field we want to update, in which case our field is, it's not count this time, it's content. Yeah. So this is just the syntax for record updates. You know, I guess in JavaScript they're just called object updates.
Yeah. It took me a while to get that one. I was like, huh? Yeah. Cool. So then I go content is equal to model, or assigned model dot content.
So what do we want to do with the string that's coming in? I'm thinking we just want to replace content with this new string that's coming in.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So we don't even have to, we can just say model content is equal to the string, right?
Mm-hmm. So sorry. So then what would I do?
Content, equals, and then instead of making it equal to model.content, like what's already there, we're just replacing it essentially. We're just going to replace it with the string that comes in when it changes.
So like this. No.
I'm
not clear. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. You're going to replace it with the string that comes in. So do I mean like this?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. There we go.
Okay, just because string is a type, and so I just didn't think of it as an active component. Yeah, cool.
Right. So I mean, a good, and you're new to this and you're learning. So like lowercase is always going to be a function or piece of data. Uppercase is always going to be a type or like a type name. So when we say change string, we're saying, well, change and some piece of data string, because that's what our type is. It's change in like some piece of data. So we can take that piece of data and just throw it in there. Okay, cool. So we have one last bit we need to do here, which is to actually, get the view to send the right message. Right, so like we have a message type that can handle it, and we have like a model that can handle it, but we actually need to send it to the view.
No, what do I have?
So let's go back to
Just
your
do like a
input
div,
element.
maybe? Do I want to do a div? Just throw a div in there? Like
Well,
that?
we can mess with, oh yeah, sure, if you want. Yeah,
And then I just say, and then leave this one empty because I don't do anything.
yeah, you just
Right,
want to
and
make like
then-
a little wider.
And then here I put string, right? No. Yes.
No. Okay, let's
Crap.
take a step back from the div for a second, right? Because this is supposed to be coming from our input element, right?
No. All right, cool.
No.
I'll shut up. I'm listening.
Oh, okay. I see what you wanted. No, you're absolutely on the right track. So in that div, remember, okay, so let's look at our view function. The thing that was passed into our view function was model. So if we want to access content, we just need to do that, like use it model.content, essentially. That's all you're missing there.
Crap. Ooh, I got another error.
What does the error say?
It says local parameter.
Oh, well, look, okay, well, a little below that, it said type mismatch. HTML message got a list of string. Now remember, there's a function that turns strings into HTML messages. And that function is text.
This one.
Yeah. So if you just put a text in front of it.
What's this?
No more type error. Ooh, that is the right pipe. We haven't talked about pipes yet. The pipes. So you notice the distinct lack of parentheses here in this entire thing. It's not that parentheses are invalid, but so much of functional programming is like sending data into functions, like just chaining functions. So you can read that little triangle as, hey, take everything to the right and pass it into the function on the left. So you could replace it with parentheses basically around like that entire thing to the right. Yeah, that would also work. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's sort of redundant there because there's only like one thing, but totally works.
Yeah. I got an input. That's so exciting. Cool.
But notice we still have one piece left to hook up, right? Because our div is now showing model.content, but we still have not set up like sending that message to update, right? Like we have nothing that's actually sending that message we made of change string yet. So let's do that now. So let's look at our input.
Oops. Down here. Yep, Corey. Sorry. I just
so,
was thinking, oh, yeah, okay. Yep, input.
Okay, so we are going to use, we're going to need a couple new functions to do this, and that's okay. The first one we're going to use is Placeholder, which probably does what you think. We're going to put in some text for placeholder, and it's going to put that as a placeholder for our input. So a space, no equals. Placeholder is a function that takes a string and makes a placeholder. Right, so placeholder Jeff. Cool. Now we're going to put in another. Hey, there it is. So just to kind of let it sink in, let's look at the type. Let's hover over placeholder and let's look at the type of placeholder.
String and attribute. Cool.
Take a string, I return an attribute message, right? And we know this list is supposed to be a list of attribute messages. Okay, so let's add a comma after Jeff.
Because this is all the attributes, right?
Yes. Yeah, so this is all our attributes. So we're going to add a new attribute called on input. We've been using on click for the buttons. We now need on input for the input. And let's look at the type for on input. Oh, you jumped the gun.
Wrong?
Well, the compiler says you're wrong.
Huh?
The compiler says you're wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, let's
it always says I'm wrong,
look
though,
at
right?
the type.
Mismatch
Let's look
error.
at the type for on input. What does it say?
Type mismatch error. Expected string and then return a message.
So it says, hey, I expected something that takes a string and returns a message, but you just gave me a string. Now, we actually happen to have made a function that takes a string. Oh,
I feel like I'm
remember,
close.
you're very close. If you look at the top of the view that you're looking at, right, the top of, we made a message to handle this, right?
This one, right? We're talking about this. You're talking about this?
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about our change message. Remember?
Yeah.
Change takes a string and returns a message by definition.
Takes
okay.
a message.
So you can get rid of that model.content, right? Because that's exactly what change is in our message. Change,
Because it's doing it. It's already doing it.
Right. Change is the thing where once you add the string to it, it becomes one of your messages. You have 3 messages, right? Increment, multiply, and change with a string. So change by itself is a function. You give me a string, I give you back a message. And hey,
cool.
for that.
That's so cool.
That's doing exactly.
I've never worked with a language this hard.
I guess the thing I'm hoping is that it feels hard, but once you get it, like there is some like the Tetris blocks kind of fall into place, and it stops being like magical. It's like, okay, you're doing this because of that.
I can see that, by the way. I do see that. I think in lots of ways it's just like the very first time when I was just starting out and I learned React, and I was like,
yeah,
holy crap. And then now I'm like, wow, this is holy crap. But I can see how like it's very, very logical. Like it doesn't look like there's lots of like, well, but in this case.
no, so everything. And I mean, the main thing is, so what I find interesting, especially about this like input thing, is so input says, oh, I take a list of attribute messages. And then inside it, we basically have like a bunch of functions that like take a thing and spit out attribute messages. And that's fine, right? Because again, it's all about composition. So you can put a data type, or you can put like a function and a value that return a data type. And like those are very much equivalent. So I know like you've worked with languages that have reference types and value types. There are no reference types. Everything is a value type. If 2 things have the same value, then in Elm's eyes, they are the same thing, right? There's no difference between me like directly writing an HTML message and then me putting like, hey, here's a function and a thing, and like it returns an HTML message. Elm's like, well, those are the same thing. They equal the same thing. If you have, like 3 is the same as like 2 plus 1. There's no like, oh, but underneath the memory says like that's not your concern as a developer. It's not your job to deal with like what like memory allocation for like what's actually, if you want 2 things to be distinct, you need to make them distinct, right? Like give them a field with like a different ID, but don't try and like use what's actually happening in, like memory to figure out if, and that I appreciate that explicitness. And a lot of people have found this type of language and gotten into this type of programming because it's just the lack of obfuscation. It's like this is it. You put in the function, you get the value out. If all you get your things all right, it compiles, you're good to go. It runs. There's no more like magic there. You make a type, you got to handle all the cases of the type. If you say the type takes 3 parameters, you got to pass in 3 parameters. So even things like we have like optional parameters in a lot of other languages. Oh, this could take 1 or 2 or 3 things. That doesn't really work because in functional programming, you have what's called currying. So if you have a function that takes 3 arguments and you pass in 1, it won't throw an error. You just now have a function that takes 2 arguments because you've provided the first one. So it's like, okay, well, I'm now ready to take the rest. And that's also part of like this compositional style. Anyway, I'm very aware of not trying to talk too much because
don't worry about it.
No, because you don't want to saturate people and you don't want it to overload. And I think we've done like a nice step through of, hey, how can we do this? Now, I just want to make some things clear. So we did our HTML and styling this way. This is not the only way. Well, we haven't really done any styling yet. For the most part,
it'd be like this, right? And then it's just like
yes,
something like that.
Something like that, yeah, essentially. But just to say, that's not the only way to do it. And Elm is very like styling agnostic. So there's Elm Tailwind libraries. There's Elm everything under the sun. Hold on, I'm gonna mute because I gotta charge my laptop.
It's all good. So we're gonna probably wrap up here shortly, just because let's be honest, it could go on forever, right? And so when Kirk comes back, we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, I just got to go like get the charger and make sure that works. But yeah, I think this has been, well, I'm hoping you enjoyed this, and I hope I was a good Elm host. And obviously, you don't learn an entire language in 90 minutes, but I think our goal of like just letting people get a gist of, well, how does this work and why people are into it, I think we managed to accomplish. So I'm pretty pleased with that.
Your video is not on, you know that, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right, cool.
I'll be back again. Just
no worries.
Seconds.
No, okay. Yeah.
I'm back. There we go.
There you are. Yeah, man, I don't know. I really liked it. I really didn't find Elm that approachable initially, and now I'm like, now I'm a little bit like, because I've been sort of pondering what would be the next, like Go or Elm or Rust. It's probably the 3 that I've been thinking about. So it's nice to have had this opportunity.
Rust.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was just gonna say I want to try Rust. Rust looks super cool. I judge languages a lot by, I think, like the enthusiasm of the people who write them, and the people who write Rust seem to love Rust, and that's like the biggest endorsement it can get to me as a language. When people are like, "Oh, I love writing this," I'm like, "Well, that feels like it's worth checking out," right?
Totally. Yeah.
Also, if it gets me to avoid writing C++, then sure.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was thinking about it. Yeah, for sure. I think WebAssembly is pretty interesting, and obviously nobody ever wants to write WebAssembly, and so I know Rust and I believe Go, but Rust is supposed to be the best library to compile into WebAssembly.
Assembly for sure.
I've heard assembly script is pretty good, but yeah, so it's it's complicated, right? As you know, to try to figure out where you're going to put some time into things. So this is like really valuable, and I hope other people that come and watch it get the same value from it, because I think it's these kinds of like gentle walkthroughs are how people sort of decide whether they're going to jump into the deep end and go for it.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, in the last year, I have been very fortunate to have done like experienced a lot of like, this is, I think my favorite way to like learn about a new thing is how someone else gets super into it and then they just take the time to like gently explain to me like why they enjoy it. And that feels so much more engaging than like reading some article or whatever, because you get the person's enthusiasm and you get to see like, well, what do they think the gist of it is? And maybe you don't agree, or like maybe it doesn't suit your style, but at least like you get that like kind of opinion. And I try and be, I obviously like but like I try to be honest with it with people. Not everyone likes this, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Elm, as you can see, is very opinionated. Some
Mhm.
people like a little more flexibility in the tools they use, and that's okay. For me, especially, Elm was how I learned web development, and I really appreciated something that was like, just do it like this, like, here's the tools, do it like this. And like, I couldn't shoot myself in the foot just like spiraling between like 5 or 7 or 12 different like options. When you're new, sometimes what you don't want is a bunch of options. You want like a well thought out, like opinionated stance. And it's like, hey, do this, and there are other ways, but you will reach those other ways when you're ready and when you're comfortable. But for now, do this and it will work. And for Elmo, it's like, if I write this, HTML comes out and like I see a website come out, and I could just focus on doing that for months. And then when I was ready, okay, what else is out there? What are the other styles? How do and I found that super valuable. So I
Yeah, I
always
think
encourage people to try it.
that's why Vue is popular in the JavaScript
Yeah.
world. Like juniors
Yes.
just love Vue because it's just, you can just
Does
get
the thing.
rolling right away. Just that their CLI has been just like, wow. I
Yeah.
still remember the first time I ever used it. And I was like, that's it. And he's like, yep. And then there's like a dashboard and like everything's all there. And I'm like, holy crap. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Netlify too. I think Netlify, 11D, a lot of them have sort of nailed the, just, this is how you get started.
yeah,
And when you are ready, I think that's important. Like, when you are ready, you want to start making changes, you can get into making changes.
yeah,
That at least the first touch is like, we're good to go.
yeah,
Yeah, so Elm's around, Elm's growing, Elm is used in production. um and a lot of people just it's like the Rust people, a lot of people just like it. But the main thing also, when I started, I found the Slack community very welcoming, very approachable, very helpful community, which I think is always important for any new and burgeoning language. If the people in the space are jerks, people don't want to hang out there. So I always appreciate that from Elm, for sure.
I was part of a community a couple months ago and I got really into it. I was excited. And all I found was every time I made a suggestion, it was like, oh, totally great. And then somebody else would do it. Or anytime I was like, yeah, there's just felt like so many roadblocks. Or when I'd ask for help, it was like never, no response, even though you could see a bunch of people that were like leaders or knowledgeable in the group were all green. And I was just like, okay. So
This is rough.
yeah, it's just, and then somebody else would make a comment and then all of a sudden there's like a whole bunch of responses. And I'm just like, wow, this is interesting. Yeah,
This doesn't feel great.
yeah. And I know it wasn't personal because,
Mhm.
I'd only had positive interactions when they were positive, like when there was interactions. But it's just like sometimes sometimes um like projects or whatever, right? Projects of any kind, they have more people joining than there's an ability to support. And so then people just pick and choose when they can support. And I don't think Elm is going to win any fashionable awards right now. So that means it's probably growing at a nice, like you said, it's growing. So I mean, if it's growing, it's probably going to grow at a nice, steady pace that's easy to absorb and welcome new people into it, right? Which is awesome.
I hope so.
You know, that's really cool to have. So that's neat. This is really neat, man. I really appreciate it. I'm just kind of cruising through it.
Yeah.
I gotta I think we're right on time, actually. This is awesome. So it's 6:30 my time. What time is it for you? You're
Oh yeah, it's exactly 8:30 my time. So we did it.
cool. That's awesome. That was our goal.
Yeah.
I figured it was going to go either really early or really late, because usually these things don't go that way, right? So that's so cool. We landed you landed this plane right on to the dot, and that's awesome. I have a friend of mine that watches my YouTube videos and Twitch streams, and he always says try to keep it to 45 minutes to an hour. And so we basically did that. So
Awesome.
that's cool. Kirk, man, what can I say other than thank you so much?
Hey, thank you for
For
having me. I appreciate it. I'm always happy to babble about stuff I like. So
That's
totally.
so cool. Well, we'll have to do another one of these days, or at least if I get a chance to do one on Go, or because this has actually made me think about it now. I'm thinking maybe I'll get somebody on Go and get somebody on Rust.
Do
And
it.
if you're interested, you can now always jump in and we could do make it a group thing and learn if you're interested in that. I don't know if you know those languages.
I don't. So I'm super happy to, you know, like all the, like you have your list of things you want to touch on, and yeah, totally be down. Totally.
Cool. Right on. I will bring it up with the people that I'm already putting on my mental list. And then, yeah, that'd be cool. Cause it's definitely more fun, I think, if you can get a couple people, cause it's like
Yes.
sitting down and having dinner, right? Like you haven't seen a friend in a long
Mhm.
time. Conversation's gonna, it's gonna be good, but it's still way more dynamic if your other two
Yep.
buddies that you're all buddies with are there, and then the jokes start laughing, and it's
Yeah.
always just much more rich. So I think that's the one thing I think I'm gonna try on the next one and see if we can get you in there, get one of my buddies in one of those languages. And if you know somebody that you think would want to do it, we can do that too. So it doesn't have to be like one of my friends. It can be 100% one of your friends. I don't mind.
I do also like this format of like like you're the one in the code, you're making changes, like you would go off, play around, come back, and I'm just here to, I'm just like your shepherd, just making sure you don't get like too far away from the homestead, So I like this a lot. It was cool for sure. Let's
Yeah,
do
I
it.
think it worked well. I think you handled me really well when I was doing some silly things, and when I was doing some good things. It was good. I felt positive the whole time. So
Awesome.
cool, man. I got to skedaddle because I'm sure my wife will yell up the stairs any minute now, in a polite way, of course,
Yes.
because she's not like that. We'll be like, "Hey, are you done yet?" So,
Yeah.
dude, have a wonderful evening. Get home safe. Be safe. All the best to your family. Okay.
You as well, man. This was great. Have a great night. Later.
Cheers.